What is the primary goal of the Hazardous Materials Regulations, HMR? To protect people, property, and the environment from the risks of hazardous materials in transit. By setting rules for packaging, labeling, and handling, the HMR minimize incidents. Mission clear, onward. What identifies the hazard class of a material on a vehicle, and when is it typically required? A placard required on the exterior of vehicles transporting certain quantities and types of hazardous materials. These large signs warn responders and motorists of the load's dangers. Placards up. Next. How is a material defined as hazardous for transportation purposes? It is designated by the Department of Transportation as posing an unreasonable risk to health, safety, or property during transportation. Only DOT-listed materials get the hazardous label to ensure focus on true risks. Definition set. Moving on. How many main hazard classes are there under the HMR? 9 distinct hazard classes. Each class groups materials by shared dangers like flammability or toxicity. 9 noted. Let's continue. Where must hazardous materials shipping papers be located in a vehicle during transport? Readily accessible to the driver in a specific location, like a pouch on the door or on the driver's seat. Quick access ensures you can hand them to responders immediately. Papers ready? Next. What minimum information is required on a hazardous materials shipping paper? Proper shipping name, hazard class, identification number, and the packing group if assigned. This core data lets anyone reading know exactly what's on board. Info logged onward. What is the main purpose of the Emergency Response Guidebook, ERG? To provide initial guidance for emergency responders dealing with hazardous materials incidents. Color-coded pages help responders choose safe actions fast. Guide in hand. Next. When must a driver attend a placarded vehicle carrying hazardous materials? When loading or unloading, or anytime the vehicle is parked or stopped unless permitted to leave it unattended in a secure location. This prevents tampering or unauthorized access. Stay close. Let's go. If a placarded vehicle is parked and unattended, where must it be located? In a designated hazardous materials parking area or a safe location away from highly populated areas and public roads. Isolation reduces risks to bystanders if a release occurs. Safe spot. Next. What must a driver do before beginning to load or unload hazardous materials? Review the shipping papers, confirm the material matches the papers, and ensure the vehicle and site are safe. Verifying details prevents loading mistakes and spills. Check complete. Moving on. What type and rating of fire extinguisher is required on a commercial vehicle transporting hazardous materials? At least a 10B/C rating, or a combination of ratings totaling 10B/C or more. This ensures you can fight small fires and flammable or electrical hazards. Extinguisher ready next. What are subsidiary hazards? Additional hazards associated with a material besides its primary hazard class. They warn of risks like toxicity or reactivity beyond the main danger. Subsidiary noted onward. What is the function of the segregation table for mixed loads in the HMR? It indicates which hazardous materials are incompatible and cannot be loaded together on the same transport vehicle. Following it prevents chemical interactions during transit. Loaded right next. What is the first priority if you discover a leak of hazardous materials from your vehicle while on the road? Safely move the vehicle away from people and property if possible, contact emergency services, and refer to the ERG. Quick separation and expert help minimize harm. Leak handled onward. What is the term for the quantity of a hazardous substance that, if released, triggers specific reporting requirements? Reportable quantity RQ. Spills above the RQ must be reported to authorities immediately. RQ known next. What does a hazardous materials endorsement on a CDL signify? The driver has met the requirements to transport placarded amounts of hazardous materials. Training and testing prove you understand the risks and rules. Endorsement earned next. What are the main security concerns when transporting hazardous materials? Thefts, diversion, and potential use of the materials for malicious purposes. Securing loads prevents them falling into the wrong hands. Security tight onward. Why is proper securement, blocking and bracing of hazardous materials cargo important? To prevent movement during transportation that could lead to package damage, leaks, or shifting of the load. Stable loads reduce crash and spill risks. Cargo stable. Next. In hazardous materials transportation, what is considered a bulk package? A single container other than a vessel or barge with a large capacity for transporting hazardous materials without intermediate packaging. Think large tanks or big drums directly carrying bulk liquid or gas. Bulk defined. Onward. What are the safety requirements for loading and unloading flammable liquids? The vehicle engine must be off, the parking brake set, and sources of ignition like smoking or open flames must be prohibited nearby. Controlling sparks and heat sources prevents fires. Flammables safe. Next. When transporting Class 1, Division 1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosives, what minimum following distance is required from other vehicles? At least 500 feet. Extra space reduces damage if an explosion occurs. Distance kept onward. What is a safe haven in hazardous materials transportation? A designated location specifically approved for parking vehicles transporting explosives. It's a controlled spot built to handle explosive loads safely. Safe haven, next. What must a driver do if their planned route is blocked by a hazardous materials incident? Select an alternative route that avoids the affected area using pre-planned routes or consulting with dispatch. Detouring keeps you clear of danger zones. Route set. Moving on. What type of cargo tank is typically used to transport gasoline or fuel oil? A non-pressure tank. They carry flammable liquids at or near atmospheric pressure. Tank noted. Next. What is outage when filling a cargo tank with liquid hazardous materials? The empty space left in a tank to allow for expansion of the liquid. Preventing overfill avoids dangerous pressure buildup. Space left, onward. Who is responsible for properly classifying a hazardous material for transportation? The person who offers the hazardous material for transportation, the shipper. Shippers know the material's properties and risk level. Classification clear. Next. What is the primary purpose of carrying emergency placards in a placarded vehicle? To replace any placards that become lost, damaged, or unreadable during transport. Backup placards keep your vehicle compliant and safe. Backup ready, onward. What is required if you are involved in an accident while transporting hazardous materials? Secure the scene, ensure safety, notify emergency responders immediately, and provide accurate information from the shipping papers. Full disclosure lets responders take correct actions. Accident managed, next. What is the purpose of a uniform hazardous waste manifest? To track the movement of hazardous waste from its point of generation to its final disposal location. It documents every transfer for environmental accountability. Manifest complete, onward. What is the main hazard of mixing incompatible hazardous materials during transport? It can lead to dangerous chemical reactions, potentially causing fires, explosions, or the release of toxic substances. Strict segregation prevents runaway reactions. Loads separated, next. What are the regulations regarding smoking when near a placarded vehicle? Smoking is prohibited within 25 feet of a placarded cargo tank and around vehicles being loaded or unloaded with flammable materials. No sparks allowed near volatile vapors. No smoking, moving on. Why is it important to display the identification number of a hazardous material on placards or orange panels? The identification number allows emergency responders to quickly determine the specific hazardous material involved in an incident. Numbers link to detailed response guides in the ERG. Numbers posted. Next. When is it necessary to consult a segregation and compatibility chart? When loading multiple different hazardous materials onto the same vehicle to ensure they can be safely transported together. Charts prevent incompatible mixtures aboard. Compatibility checked. Onward. What factors should be considered when planning a route for transporting hazardous materials? Avoiding populated areas, tunnels, bridges with restrictions, and other high-risk zones when practical. Route planning reduces exposure in case of incident. Route safe. Next. What are the requirements for attending a placarded vehicle during a required break? The driver must remain within 100 feet of the vehicle and have it within their clear line of sight. This ensures quick action if security or leaks become issues. Break done. Onward. What is a primary hazard associated with transporting corrosive materials? Class 8. They can cause severe damage to skin, eyes, and other tissues and corrode materials. Spills can eat through containers if not handled properly. Corrosives noted next. What precautions are necessary when loading or unloading corrosive liquids? Wearing appropriate PPE and having access to a water source for flushing in case of contact. Immediate decontamination prevents chemical burns. Protection set. Onward. What is the main risk associated with transporting flammable solids, Class 4? They are easily ignited and can burn rapidly and intensely. Friction or sparks can start fast-moving fires. Flammables ready. Next. Why is proper ventilation important when transporting certain hazardous materials? To prevent the accumulation of flammable or toxic vapors within the cargo area. Airflow disperses vapors and reduces explosion or inhalation risks. Ventilation on. Next. What marking requirements apply to hazardous materials packages? Packages must display the proper shipping name, identification number, and appropriate hazard labels. Correct markings alert handlers to the package's contents. Labels set. Onward. What is the difference between a hazardous material label and a placard? A label is a hazard warning applied to individual packages, while a placard is a larger sign affixed to the transport vehicle. Labels guide package handlers. Placards warn everyone nearby. Signs clear. Next. What is the function of a bill of lading when transporting hazardous materials? While serving as a contract of carriage, it also contains essential information about the hazardous materials being transported. It ties the shipment details to legal and safety responsibilities. Lading logged. Next. What is a potential hazard associated with transporting oxidizing substances, Class 5? They can cause or contribute to the combustion of other materials by yielding oxygen. Mixing with fuels can ignite fires without external sparks. Oxygen dangers. Onward. What are the basic requirements for cargo tanks used to transport hazardous materials? They must be designed, constructed, and maintained according to specific DOT specifications and undergo regular inspections and testing. Standards ensure they withstand pressure, corrosion, and impact. Tanks certified. Next. What is the primary purpose of a pressure relief device on a cargo tank? To prevent overpressurization of the tank that could lead to rupture. It vents excess pressure safely to avoid explosions. Pressure safe. Onward. What action should you take if you discover a damaged or leaking package of hazardous materials? Isolate the package if safe to do so. Avoid contact with the material, secure the area, and immediately notify emergency responders and your carrier. Prompt isolation and reporting limits spread and harm. Leak isolated. Next. What is indicated by the different packing groups, I, 2, and 3, assigned to some hazardous materials. The degree of danger posed by the material, with packing group 1 indicating the greatest danger. Higher group numbers signal lower hazards. Groups known. Onward. What are the rules regarding transporting hazardous materials in the same vehicle with food or animal feed? Specific regulations prohibit or restrict the transportation of certain hazardous materials with food or animal feed due to contamination risks. Segregation prevents toxic contamination. Food safe. Next. What is the purpose of communication rules in hazardous materials transportation? To ensure that all parties involved in the transportation process have the necessary information about the hazards of the materials. Clear communication prevents mishandling at every step. Messages clear. Onward. What is a significant danger of transporting materials classified as Division 2-3 poison gas? Exposure, even to small amounts, can be extremely hazardous and potentially fatal. Gas leaks can incapacitate or kill quickly. Gases noted. Next. Why is maintaining proper tire pressure essential for a vehicle transporting hazardous materials? Underinflated or overinflated tires can increase the risk of tire failure, potentially leading to an accident and release of hazardous materials. Correct pressure ensures stability and prevents blowouts. Tires set. Next. What is a major hazard associated with transporting materials classified as Class 7, radioactive material? The emission of ionizing radiation, which can cause biological damage. Shielding and distance controls exposure levels. Radiation warned. Onward. What triggers the requirement for initial notification to authorities following a hazardous materials incident? Incidents involving fatalities, injuries requiring hospitalization, significant property damage, or the release of a reportable quantity. Timely alerts mobilize proper emergency response. Notification made. Next. What is the purpose of placarding exceptions? They permit the transport of limited quantities or specific types of hazardous materials without requiring the vehicle to be placarded. Small loads can move without full placarding, but still follow safety rules. Exceptions noted. Onward. Why is comprehensive training critical for drivers who transport hazardous materials? Proper training ensures drivers understand the regulations, risks, safety procedures, and emergency responses required for hazardous materials transportation. Knowledgeable drivers prevent accidents and handle incidents correctly. Training complete. End of set.